A few years ago, the historical drama War of Currents about Thomas Edison, George Westinghouse, and Nikola Tesla was released. Through the prism of this, no doubt, good film, it is very interesting to consider the real Thomas Edison, played by Benedict Cumberbatch. And also those historical characters who were associated with him. Was he a great inventor or a patent swindler? The answer to this question, like many other things in our lives, is not as clear and simple as it seems, so let's figure it out. And in this issue you will learn something that cannot be found on Wikipedia and that will greatly expand your picture of the world and understanding of the historical process. Go. So what is the film War of the Currents about? Edison already has many important patents behind him, including a device capable of recording and reproducing the human voice. The new toy captures the imagination of Americans and makes him a star. Thanks to the phonograph, Edison receives an audience with the President of the United States. He uses this meeting to promote a new idea. He wants to bring electric light to the houses of an entire area in New York, and then throughout America. However, Edison's competitors are not sitting idly by. George Westinghouse discovers an imperfection in Edison's lighting system. He uses low-voltage DC circuits, which is why the system does not work over long distances. Westinghouse proposes to transmit electricity with minimal losses using alternating current. Edison, stung by polite attempts to establish a partnership, completely refuses to cooperate with Westinghouse and unleashes a confrontation with him with lawsuits and dirty manipulations in the press. Fierce competition pushes Edison into a moral dilemma. Before this, he refuses to develop weapons for the government. The inventor begins to kill animals with the help of alternating current generators. Having gathered the press, he introduces the first ever Westinghouse horse, and then secretly consults on the creation of an electric chair that works on the competitor's current. On Westinghouse's side is Nikola Tesla, to whom Edison did not pay a remuneration of $50,000 for his work. Allegedly, Tesla misunderstood his American humor, and he owes him nothing. In general, the film debunks Edison's cult of personality, tearing away the veil of mysticism and pathos that he persistently created around himself during his lifetime, taking advantage of public attention and manipulating the press. You didn't invent the incandescent lamp, everyone just thinks so, Edison hears. We all contribute. How is the real Edison different from the one shown in the film? On the real, not the cinematic Edison, what is the difference between the historical character and his Hollywood version? He received neither professional nor even general education. He was homeschooled, worked as a newspaper delivery boy, and then, at the age of just 15, got a job as a telegraph operator. As a teenager, he began to lose his hearing, which, according to him, allowed him to be alone with his thoughts, without being distracted by the noise from telegraph machines. It was at this job that Edison became closely acquainted with the principles of electricity. He was haunted by ideas to improve the telegraph, and from the age of 22 he began contract development in New York. Among his achievements were the automatic telegraph, which increased transmission speed from 50 to 200 words per minute, the quadruplex telegraph, which transmitted 4 messages at a time, and the ticker machine for transmitting stock quotes. With money from his inventions, Edison opened a laboratory in a village called Menlo Park. A small invention every 10 days and something major once a month, he set such a task for his subordinates. Someone will later admiringly call this invention factory one of the first research think tanks. And someone will add that they received very little there was no standard working day in principle, and when work came to a standstill and the employee's strength was at its limit, equipment and drawings were moved to the side. Instead of them crackers, ham, and cheese appeared on the tables, soda and beer. Edison often personally sat down at the small organ located right there, and a general retreat began with singing and dancing. Having rested, everyone went back to work, often falling asleep at work. The Wizard of Menlo Park was the first to introduce the practice of detailed questionnaires for hired employees. Moreover, among the questions one could encounter the following: Who is Plutarch and where is the Volga? Edison believed that an inventor, first of all, needs a broad outlook and open-minded thinking, and if it was necessary to choose from the pair, a narrow specialist or an amateur with imagination, the choice often fell on the latter. After all, in order to invent something truly incredible, sometimes it is better not to know that experts consider it impossible. One may have different opinions about his character, ambition, or not particularly clean working methods, but the fact is that Edison's typical working day lasted 16 to 19 hours. This obsession with work yielded results. In total, he owned the rights to 1,093 patents in the United States and 1,239 patents in other countries. However, he did not so much invent his own as improve someone else's, so to speak, bringing it to market condition. Burdened with a perfectionism complex, he liked to say, "If I take something in my hand, I immediately begin to think about how it can be improved." Edison's second complex was the desire to score all the areas he could reach, without disdaining, to put it mildly, dubious methods. He simply could not stand the existence of empty or alien sectors in the market. In particular, being carried away, like many Hollywood vs. Edison inventors of that time, by newfangled cinema. Edison quickly created and patented one of the first movie cameras, the kinetoscope. And at the same time, film production and film distribution. At the same time, this inventor became the first video pirate, illegally duplicating the 1902 film A Trip to the Moon into several hundred copies. In general, in the first decade and a half of the last century, all American cinema was produced and distributed by the Edison Company. And the result of the fight against this monopoly was the creation of Hollywood. Edison, who ate the dog on patent squabbles, could not learn one piece of wisdom: you can patent any technological discovery, but not an entire industry. And although in American patent law, where in detail everything for which patents are not issued is listed, for example, for newly discovered laws of nature, certain branches of the entertainment industry are not mentioned. In practice, no one was going to put up with Edison's dictates in such a rapidly developing field as cinema. Dissatisfied with Edison, directors and producers, one after another, flocked from the East Coast to the West Coast, to sunny California. They always treated Washington's rules with coolness, often passing their own laws openly in defiance of the federal ones, and Mexico, as they say, was at hand to save all violators. And besides, the climate, nature. Take it off, I don't want to. And although Edison fought the pirates like a lion, in 1915 the court recognized his activities in cinematography as a hidden form of monopoly. And the sorcerer from Menlo Park was forced to retreat. By that time, work on developing the suburbs of Los Angeles, that same Hollywood, was already in full swing. Another striking example is Alexander Bell introducing the world to the first telephone, a device that promised the collapse of the telegraph industry. Within a few months, Edison developed an improved version of Bell's invention, capable of transmitting clearer sound over longer distances. During the development process, he also came across the idea of a phonograph, capable of recording and reproducing the human voice for the first time in history. Bell subsequently bit his elbows. The operating principle of the device was so simple, which he overlooked when creating the telephone. Thanks to the invention, Edison became known as the sorcerer from Menlo Park and gained popular love, which he did not fail to take advantage of. He deftly managed his fame, giving numerous presentations to the press and corresponding with investors, from whom he extracted money for his needs. Then he was captivated by the idea of introducing electric light into homes. Edison and the light bulb. Edison really was not the inventor of the light bulb. This is mainly the merit of Russian engineers Lodygin and Yablokov, but this is the topic of a separate issue on our channel. Yes, and electric lighting already existed, only it was used only on the streets. They were illuminated using arc lamps, but the glow was so powerful that it turned out to be impossible to look at them, and it was uncomfortable to be near them. The apartments, in turn, were lit by gas lamps, which smelled, warmed the rooms, and were not bright enough. As in the case of telegraph and telephony, Edison took other people's ideas and made significant improvements to them. And in the case of lighting, a lot of things needed to be improved. In addition to developing a light bulb that would not burn out in 10 minutes, it was necessary to optimize the socket for it and the entire electricity delivery system. The fight for the right to electrify cities really forced Edison to engage in black PR. He sponsored demonstrations of the killing of stray dogs using Westinghouse generators and was behind the creation of the electric chair, designed to humanely execute criminals with alternating current. Newspapers covering the device often featured Westinghouse's name, which harmed the campaign for alternating current electrification. Decisive in the war of currents was Nikola Tesla's invention of the alternating current induction motor, which he sold to Westinghouse. His electrification scheme became even more economically profitable. In 1893, Westinghouse won the contract to illuminate the Chicago Science Fair, demonstrating to the world that his system was cheap, effective, and not deadly, as Edison claimed. But in this whole story, who was behind Thomas Edison? There is another character who is mentioned only briefly in the film. And in general, it's not particularly common to remember him. But we will definitely do this. This man's name is J.P. Morgan. After all, in the same feature film, the relationship between Thomas Edison and Morgan is reflected only in strokes, but they are of very great importance. So, in 1878, Edison uttered the famous phrase, "We will make electricity so cheap that only the rich will burn candles." Having learned about the successful experiences and ambitious plans of the young inventor, J.P. Morgan personally visits Edison's laboratory and establishes direct contacts. After all, as they say, a good businessman always offers people for money what they don't have. Rockefeller, kerosene, Gates, Windows, Jobs, iPhone, Zuckerberg, Facebook. Well, Morgan was going to offer people electricity. By that time, he was already a very experienced leader of his clan. Behind him is the American Civil War between North and South, but, of course, not as cannon fodder. For example, at the very beginning of hostilities, John and his companion buy out-of-use weapons from the Southerners and sell them with a 25% markup to the Northerners. Young J.P.'s military operations during the Civil War were so odious that they later became the subject of an investigation by a U.S. Congressional Commission on charges of no less than treason. But Morgan managed to get out. 4 years of war molded the young J.P. into the seasoned John Pierpont Morgan, the head of one of the most influential financial clans in America, who is credited with the following words, "Big money is not made with white gloves." Also in 1878, J.P. Morgan, Thomas Edison and several partners founded the Edison Electric Light Company. By 1883, it produced 3/4 of the electric lamps in the United States. At first glance, everything is going perfectly well. But something happens that J.P. really doesn't like. In his electricity, where he has invested tens of millions, the same war of currents is coming, and this is the competition hated by the Morgans. After all, the Morgans, the Rockefellers, and the Vanderbilts fought against competition by creating major monopolies, each in their own fields. In those years, there was even such a term, merorganization, when enterprises of the same profile were brought together into a single structure to suppress competition between them. Such mergers did not depend on the industry, both metallurgy and banking were organized. It is interesting that in 1912, the antitrust investigations raging in the states also caught up with Great Jupiter, as J.P. Morgan was often called. Again, as after accusations of treason, he had to speak in his defense at Senate hearings. This absolute opponent of competition fundamentally did not understand what he was accused of. It is very significant that the name of J.P. Morgan is associated not only with Edison, but also with Nikola Tesla, whose main idea was the project at Wardenclyffe. It was a station for transmitting not only messages, but also energy over vast distances. Tesla believed that the Earth itself and the upper layers of the atmosphere could be used for such a miracle transmission, and he proved his rightness through experiments. In 1901, Tesla attracted the attention of the leader of the Manhattan financial elite, the same J.P. Morgan, with his project of electricity without wires. Nikola Tesla said that he could build a transatlantic communication line between New York and London for $150,000. Morgan agreed to give this money to create a company, where he would get 51% of the shares and the rights to many of the inventor's patents. With these funds, Tesla bought 200 acres of land in the vicinity of New York and began to build a station there with a fancy tower. And suddenly, as if completely by accident, everything went wrong. Morgan stopped funding the project, demanding the scientist's investment money and not giving him control of 51% of the company's shares. Tesla began to finance the construction from his own pocket, bombarding Morgan with letters with humiliating requests for another $150,000. But Morgan, without giving up control over the project, demanded that the scientist himself look for the money. As a result, Tesla lost the purchased land, creditors stole the unique equipment, and the tower was blown up in the same year when the Russian Empire was blown up, in 1917. Of course, it wasn't about the money. $300,000 was a large sum at that time. But not for Morgan, he regularly spent several times that amount on works of art. The thing is that being a 100% capitalist, Morgan existed by controlling prices, energy distribution, and preserving the working class in the interests of giant monopolies. The wire-based electric power industry promised huge profits for Morgan and other oligarchs, expanding demand for non-ferrous metals from which wires were made and rubber from which insulation was made. For example, the Guggenheims, the Barracks, and Morgan himself invested huge amounts of capital in copper mining in Alaska. Now, after such eloquent touches to the portrait, it's time to rewind a little and return to the war of currents. Obviously, JP could not stand such disgrace for a long time. Therefore, the scientific and technical conflict over which he stood was resolved in a completely business-like manner. Morgan bought a controlling stake in Edison Electric Light on the stock exchange, threw Edison out of business, took away the talented Serb's main patents for alternating current from Tesla's partner George Westinghouse, and merged Edison Electric Light with Thomson Houston & Co. in 1892 into the iconic company of the 20th century, General Electric. How fair is all this to Edison? Conclusions. Well, who cares? After all, Edison, with all his complex character, was nevertheless a very skillful entrepreneur. Most of his companies were profitable. But wealth as such was of little interest to him. I needed money for work, I don't need the success of the rich. I don't need horses or yachts, I don't have time for all this. I need a workshop. That's what he said. Now, after everything that you saw in this film, you can draw your own conclusions about what contribution Thomas Alva Edison made to scientific and technological progress. What is more negative or positive in his legacy? Most likely, you will not limit yourself to a black and white palette. Write your thoughts in the comments, it will be interesting to read. Thank you for watching and see you in future episodes on our channel.